Jim, who normally starts and leads all this, is sick with COVID, so is unable to be here, so I inherit that part. And let's see, I think all we need to get started here are devotions. So, and then we'll have our introductions.
I got Nancy, Mike, I got you. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm not going to clip it on because I don't know where to clip it, so you can hear me. So what I'm reading from tonight is, it's called 100 Favorite Hymns, and it's just little devotionals on different hymns. So this one, I'm not going to tell you until we get, you'll know when we get further down. Have you ever wondered if you were enough? Maybe you felt inadequate for a task you were given or a situation that came your way. It could be that you have felt like a disappointment in some area of your life. These occasional moments of self-doubt are common across humanity. They often come into play in a relationship with the Lord. Charlotte Elliott wrote the words to one of the world's most famous hymns, Just As I Am, during a moment of intense self-doubt. Her brother, a reverend, was planning an event to help underprivileged girls with their education. Elliott was plagued with feelings of uselessness and uncertainty as to how she could contribute. She became uncertain of her own very salvation. Elliott decided to write down everything she knew to be true of God, of herself, and of her relationship to Him. She told herself the gospel all over again, and at the end of it was reminded that she was accepted by the beloved, just as she was. She realized that in the state of her salvation, she was based on her feelings, but on the work of Jesus Christ. It is in the story of each and every believer. We come to Jesus feeling broken and helpless and undeserving of God's grace. We all come to Him the same, just as we are, claiming the blood of Christ. Just as I am without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, and that thou bidst me come to thee, O Lamb of God, I come, I come. Lord, there is nothing in me deserving of your love, but I come to you just as I am. Amen. Oh, yeah. It's back.
Karen Al-Sadi now will introduce our speaker. Need some help with that?
Last month, I went to a lecture, and it was on hearing benefits that are available to state retirees. And big poster, and it said, 89% of the people who are aged 80 have a hearing loss or a hearing impairment. I had two thoughts. The first one was, oh, I had no idea it was so pervasive. But the second one was, thank you, Lord, that we have Thomas O'Connor scheduled for November. I was very happy about that. Mr. O'Connor is an audiologist, and he has a variety of experiences. He was the clinical supervisor of the audiology department at MSU, his alma mater. He served as a major in the U.S. Army for 10 years, providing a range of services. He was manager of the adult hearing aid services at the Hearing Rehabilitation Center for the U of M Health Services for 12 years, and he opened his private practice in 2007. Tom is a member of the American Academy of Audiology and a past president of the Michigan Academy of Audiology, the American Speech and Hearing Association, In 2011, Governor Snyder appointed him to the Michigan Board of Audiology, which oversees Michigan's 500 audiologists. He served on that board for 8 years, 7 years as board chairman. And he now has his own business. He's partial owner of O'Connor Hearing. Thomas.
Thank you. Am I on? Yes. Thanks very much, Karen. I appreciate that. I'm here with my business partner, Claudia. So we have managed O'Connor Hearing Center for, as Karen said, for 15 years. And hopefully we've made a difference in quite a few people in the Ann Arbor area. I'm very pleased to be here. I think the Stephen ministry, from what I've learned about it just after Karen brought it to our attention, seems like just a terrific ministry. And I'm glad to try to help and maybe give you some pointers on talking to people with hearing loss. Keep going. There you go. So the first thing we're going to do is listen to a TED Talk. Some of you may have heard TED Talks before. It's usually some sort of technical discussion about interesting things out in the world. Often it's electronic related, but not necessarily. It's just very interesting, and usually on National Public Radio. But this particular one features Mary Louise Kelly, who, if you listen to NPR, especially in the afternoon, she's one of the anchors of All Things Considered in the afternoon. And she does have a hearing loss. We're going to hear a little bit of her story. And we're going to look at kind of how hearing loss affects us and the people around us. And while, as I note on your doors, we are medium for Washtenaw County at the moment, as the winter rolls on, I'm sure that there'll be at least weeks, if not the rest of the winter, that it may very well become high. If it's high, of course, hearing or face masks are going to be required. And of course, as the ministry that you're doing, many of the people that you talk to are already at high risk. So face masks may be something that are required. Even if it's medium, you have to take care of the people that you're working with. And we're going to talk a little bit just about how to communicate with people, especially with people with hearing loss, more specifically. So here is Mary Louise Kelly. Let's see if this. Yeah.
It's the TED Radio Hour from NPR. I'm Manoush Zamarodi. What if your job depended on listening, but you had trouble hearing?
It's, I guess, one of the biggest ironies from the department of you could not make this up, that yes, my job is to ask people questions and then listen, like really, really listen to the answers. And I can't really hear.
This is Mary Louise Kelly. You might recognize her voice because she is one of the hosts of NPR's All Things Considered.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Sasha Pfeiffer.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. Coming up in Louisville, protests are yet another prominent conservative is urging Republicans to cross party on the street here in Atlanta, covering the protests when a young woman approached. She told
She's covered everything from the Trump-Putin summit in Helsinki to life in North Korea. Do you remember when you started losing your hearing?
I don't know exactly when I started to have hearing loss. It's a funny thing. I think it's a little more complicated than realizing you don't have the same eyesight you did when you were 16 and you need glasses. With hearing, it's more nuanced. You don't know if you're not hearing everything that somebody else is. In my case, I had, a moment where it became undeniable. I was 42. I had just published a book. I was on book tour, and it became apparent at event after event, I couldn't hear the questions. It felt like everybody was mumbling all the time. You can ask people to repeat or speak up, or I would ask If I had a friend in the front row to kind of relay things, but after a while it just becomes embarrassing, and I realized I should go get this checked out. And I did. It was humbling, in part because I still, to this day, can pass with flying colors the little minimal hearing test that we all get with an annual physical, where they say, raise your hand if you hear the beep. I can hear the beep. What I can't do is distinguish between consonants. No matter how loud the volume is, I can't make out words anymore. And when I went to the full workup with the audiologist, they did a test with me, and they said, I'm going to say a word, just repeat the word. I said, okay, and it would be park bench, and I would say park bench. I would say skateboard, and I would say skateboard, and I would say purple, and I would say purple. It was fine. I didn't do great, but I think I got something like 7 or 8 out of 10. And then they repeated it, the same test, park bench, but holding just a piece of printer paper, skateboard, up in front of their lips so that I could not see the audiologist's lips move. Purple, and I think I got 3 out of 10. And I realized how much, without even realizing it, I had come to rely on being able to see somebody's face, being able to see their lips move. And when I can't do that, I really can't hear. And they told me I had severe to profound hearing loss, particularly at higher frequencies, which means I was missing an awful lot.
And so you got hearing aids.
I got hearing aids, and that was a revelation. The first day I got them, everything was so loud in ways good and bad. Good ways, I'd kind of forgotten pop music had words, and I was bopping along singing and thinking, I haven't actually heard what they were saying, and I don't know how long, but it's been a while. I realized I was driving my kids around just doing school carpool back in the days when they actually had carpool and went to school on campus, and I realized they're chattering away, my children in the back seat, and it had just been this hum for years. I hadn't been able to hear what they were saying, and now I could listen to them. I mean, what a moment of joy. On the flip side, I remember the first time I walked into Starbucks with hearing aids, and I burst into tears and had to walk right back out because it was so loud. I hadn't heard the coffee grinders in their full glory for years, and they're really, really loud. And so there's an adjustment as your brain relearns how to process all of those sounds and help you make sense of them.
Sound surrounds us. Some sounds inundate us and invade our ears. Others we choose to seek out. From total cacophony to the beauty of complete silence. Depending on how we hear, the world can be a totally different auditory experience for each of us. So today on the show, ideas about how we experience sound and why we also need silence to make sense of it all. And for Mary Louise, her hearing aids were a huge help, but now she's dealing with some new hurdles.
When you have hearing loss, it's a nightmare for a couple of reasons. One is the social distancing. I'm used to being able to lean in. If I can't hear you, I'm going to get closer so that I can see your lips, so that you're louder, so that you're right in my face. And when you have to stay at least 6 feet away from somebody, you can't do it. Then there's the terrible double whammy of masks. And I should say, for the record, I'm all for masks. I wear them. I hope everyone wears them. However, they muffle your voice, any of them, and they prevent me from seeing your lips. And those two things together conspire to make it so much harder to engage in just casual conversation, or in my case, to go out and interview somebody on the street, in the field, and have any idea what you're telling me. I had a moment where it dawned on me just how difficult this was going to be. This was a late spring, that period for me in DC where we were past full lockdown. I could contemplate going to the local CVS. but I had to pick up a prescription for my youngest son. So I masked up, I brought my hand sanitizer, I had the prescription, I was all set to go just in and out. And obstacle number one, there's plexiglass everywhere. It was separating me from the pharmacist. So, okay, there's a sound barrier right there, hard to hear. And then we're both wearing masks. And the most simple transaction, 2 blocks from my house became so difficult. I come in, I tell him I'm here to pick up a refill for my son, and he looks at me and says, mumble, 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 or at least that's what I'm hearing. And I'm thinking, okay, logically he's probably asking for my son's name and birth date, so I tell him that. And the pharmacist, I can see his eyes, and he's giving me this kind of weird look, and he mumbles again, and I think, okay, what else would he need? I pull my insurance card from my wallet, hold it up. He gives me another weird look. He starts speaking more slowly. He gets the bored look that a lot of people who are hard of hearing are familiar with. And I get it. It's frustrating to talk when the other person isn't understanding you, and I can't decipher a single word. And we go through this, pantomime for a few minutes, and finally he leans back and says, "What is the phone number on file for your son?" And I say, "Oh," and I give him the phone number. And 5 minutes later I left, I got the medicine, it's all fine. I just remember going out, standing on the sidewalk and feeling scared and defeated, and thinking, I cannot manage to pick up a prescription refill at our neighborhood drugstore. How am I going to do my job? It was a moment that gave me great pause. And, you can stand there and feel sorry for yourself for a little while, and then you figure out, okay, how am I going to do this? And that has been the story of my summer, has been figuring out, how do I still do this?
Where are you on answering that question?
Yeah, obviously I find ways to do it. I anchor a national news show, despite the fact that I have significant hearing loss, and I'm doing it with hearing aids. You find ways to make it work. I have never, as an anchor, as a host on NPR, found my hearing a handicap, just doing daily interviews for the show. And I think one reason for that is context is everything when you're only catching every second or third word. It helps to know what I'm talking about. And, none of it is easy, but there's always a way, or at least I hope so. That's the plan.
That's Mary Louise Kelly. You can hear her almost every day on NPR's All Things Considered.
All right, so those of you who have hearing loss, probably what she was saying was not a great revelation. You could tell from how she was talking there, that was recorded kind of in the middle, towards the end of the worst of the pandemic. Things are obviously a little bit easier now. But she didn't really mention it, but I think one of the reasons why she's been doing pretty well as an anchor is in the studio, of course, she's wearing headphones. So she's having the sound directly broadcast into her ears. And we're going to talk about this later, but that may be one of the things that some of your care receivers would benefit from if they don't have hearing aids. This is called an assistive listening device. Basically, a microphone here. The person that's trying to hear would wear the headphones, and it makes it much, much easier to hear, especially if there's mask involved and whatnot. But kind of down the road a little bit, but I think that's one reason why she's still doing as well as she is. So some statistics, and this is sort of what Karen had mentioned. The idea is that as you get older, hearing loss is something that's more and more prevalent. As she said, once someone gets to be 75 or 80, it's unlikely that you would not have a hearing loss. Hearing loss often begins around 40-ish, 45. People tend to wait, at least 7 or 8 years before they do anything about it. So even if it's at 45 or so, it's probably at least 50 or 55 before they actually get it evaluated and maybe consider making some changes. But it's very prevalent. Men tend to be more likely to have hearing loss than women. Hearing loss is age-related, and it's often noise-related. And of course, typically men, especially in the past, men have been more likely to do noisy kinds of jobs, whether it's construction or in the military, that kind of thing. But so men are more likely to have hearing loss. And only about 30% of people who have hearing loss have hearing aids. So most people who need them do not have them. And it has a big effect on others. People who have communicated with someone who doesn't hear well find that frustrating. The person with the hearing loss, of course, finds it disappointing and frustrating and depressing to not be able to communicate. So it has an effect on both ends of the communication. And of course, there's research that just having hearing loss doesn't mean you turn the TV up louder, and that's kind of what Mary Louise Kelly was talking about. Part of the hearing range she hears very well, and this is typical with someone especially age-related. Low-pitched sounds, bass sounds, often come through pretty clearly, but the higher-pitched sounds, which is where there's S and T and SH, those really critical consonants, you don't hear those at all. So someone knocks on the door and they say, oh, I can hear that. But if they say, Sally by the seashore, don't know I have any idea what was said. And there's some things that are related to hearing loss that are not necessarily hearing. One is there's been numerous studies that have connected, not necessarily caused by, but connected to hearing loss. One of them is earlier onset of dementia. Certainly that's something that everyone wants to avoid, and hearing loss is the most modifiable action you can take. And it's not huge. Just getting a hearing aid doesn't mean you won't develop dementia, but it's the one thing that you can do yourself to actually try to stave that off. Memory loss is much more prevalent with people with untreated hearing loss, and that sort of makes sense. If you don't hear the whole conversation or don't hear every word, it's much more difficult to remember what was said if you're just trying to catch up in your head about as the conversation trots along without you. False. Another thing is that many studies have shown that people with hearing loss, untreated hearing loss, are much more likely to fall in their home. And again, you use your sense of hearing to know what's going on around you, so you don't have the same awareness, so it's easier to trip and fall. And of course, those of you who are a little bit older probably know that if you fall and break something, that's never a good thing as you're older. You definitely do not want to have a broken limb. All right, so who can read this? Give you a second to figure that out.
Did the show yesterday?
Oh, yeah, down.
Too many crossword puzzles.
Yeah, all right.
There we go. I can see it here.
Click on it.
See, I can see it.
And just click on this. Click on it. He was right.
He was right.
So
Is that showing up?
yeah, well, what was missing from there are the sibilant sounds, S and T and SH. If you don't catch all that, it's very hard, unless you know the context, to put it together.
Not everybody heard what he said. Could you repeat what he said?
I went to the show yesterday. That's what it was supposed to say. All right. All right, so what hearing loss sounds like. We'll see if this,
Get it?
get it. Yeah.
Get it.
Uh-oh.
Try again.
I bet we are connected to the internet.
Not a very good connection here.
All right. Keep going.
Okay.
Close it.
There we go.
All right, well, back to face mask. So, as we said, Washington County at the moment is medium, but that could easily change. And if you're talking to someone who has some sort of risk factor, whether they're much older or they have medical issues, you probably should wear a face mask. So when it's high, of course, you're supposed to wear a face mask, or someone's got a medical problem. there's a lot of things that face masks hide. You know, you use your facial expressions to kind of give an idea of what's going on. If you can't see that, then all those eyes, you know, maybe if they're angry, you might see it in the eyes, but you miss a lot if there's a face mask on. So kind of a busy slide, but the green line up there is hearing without a face mask, and as the different kinds of face masks are worn, you're losing about 12 decibels of sound. That is a tremendous amount of hearing loss just because of a face mask. If you paste a hearing loss on top of that, you're missing a tremendous amount of what's being said. So you have to keep that in mind when you're talking to somebody. If you're wearing a face mask, you've already disadvantaged that person quite a bit. And we have some, out in front, some tips about how to talk to someone with a face mask. And, you know, it's the same kinds of things that you would do just because you want people to hear you better. You want to be aware of the person that you're talking to. Talk right to them. Be patient. Try not to talk too quickly. Rapid speech, not only is it hard if you've got a hearing loss, but as you get older, by older I mean maybe over 60 or so, it becomes more difficult to follow rapid speech. So if someone talks very rapidly, and I hear all the time, my patients will tell me, well, I can't hear my grandkids. Well, they're talking 40 miles an hour and usually going that direction. So if you're talking to someone who may have a hearing loss, or you know they have a hearing loss, talk a little bit more slowly and right to them. So if you're a hearing loss, person with a hearing loss, you know, you have to take action, meaning you can't just sit there and kind of bemoan the fact that you're not hearing well. You need to be assertive. You can tell people that you're not hearing well and ask them not so much to speak louder, but to speak more slowly and clearly. Be aware of your situation. If you have a hearing loss or you're talking to someone you know has a hearing loss, and especially if they do not have hearing aids, if it's a noisy environment, have them sit with their back to the wall. At least then you're cutting out half of the background noise and you're looking at them, and that can make a difference. So be aware of the surroundings. You want to try to have light shining on the speaker's face, away from the person with the hearing loss. And let people know that you have a hearing loss. It's okay to say that. And oftentimes when you have a hearing loss, your impulse is to say, what? And if you say, what? Then that makes people say the same thing but yell it. And oftentimes that just doesn't really help. If you can say that differently. For instance, if someone said, let's go to Myers, and they could say Myers 40 times at increased volume every time and still have no idea what you're saying. But then if you say, well, let's go shopping at Myers, they might get it right away and say, okay, let's go. So if you can change what you're saying, if you look at them and clearly they don't know exactly what you said, rather than say the same thing much louder, try a different set of adjectives to explain what you're talking about. Oftentimes you want to, especially if you're beginning a new conversation, and if you're, say, in a group of 2 or 3 people for sure, but even in a room with someone, if you're starting the conversation, if you can say their name first. So if I say Claudia and wait a half a beat, you'll hear your own voice, your own name in a crowd of people. Someone says your name, you'll perk up. And that gets your auditory system alerted and ready to listen, and you're going to not miss those first couple words when you finally realize, oh, she's talking to me. So you want to face the speaker, and as I said, start by calling her name first if it's a new conversation. Of course, if there's a microphone available, you want to use it. As you can tell with this, it makes a huge difference. If I were to turn this off, suddenly everything would be muted, and even if I was trying to talk loudly to project, it wouldn't be nearly as clear as using a microphone. And that's the benefit of using something like an assistive listening device. You're actually using a microphone and going right into their ears. And there is extensions for this, so you can even be some distance away and they can hear what you're saying. That would be probably a good thing for the ministry to have as a resource if you know you're going to talk to someone with a hearing loss.
There we go.
All right, so hearing aids, of course, is what Claudia and I have done forever. Between the two of us, probably 70 years. But just a few minutes about hearing aids, because you may have some questions. As you may know, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hearing aids out there. Most places, ours and many other places that fit hearing aids will have different brands and different styles. It's important to kind of, when I try to fit hearing aids, kind of break it down into three categories. How well does the thing work? Does it do what you want it to do? What does it look like? And how much does it cost? Those three things are critical, and you need to be assertive when you're going to get a hearing aid to tell the person that you're working with what's important to you. It doesn't really matter so much as what's important to me. I need to make sure you get the best device that's going to fit what you want. So if you're working and it's critical that you hear staff meetings in a noisy place, then the function is going to be really critical. If you're on a budget, people can understand that, and then that might be number one, and then you get the best that's available in your kind of price range. If you're cosmetic sensitive, nothing wrong with that. It doesn't matter how good the thing is or how much it costs. If you look at it and say, I'm not going to wear that, then it's not a bargain, and you have not saved any money, you haven't helped yourself. So it has to be something that you're willing to wear, that you feel good about buying, and that it meets your needs. And it's imperative that when you talk to someone about hearing aids, that you communicate that to them. And as of a few weeks ago, and now who hasn't seen these on TV, and they've been around for a while, but after October 17th, the airways and probably your mailboxes are flooded. Over-the-counter hearing aids. I think I was annoyed when I wrote that. They're probably not my favorite thing, but you know, there's a place for them. The idea behind the legislation was relatively well-meaning. Hearing aids are very expensive. Depending on where you live in the country, it can be hard to find some place to go. If you're in the rural area, it's tough to find an audiologist. And there are millions and millions of people, probably 25 million or so, that need hearing aids that don't have them. And cost has been listed as a major issue. As an aside, when they have done studies in places like United Kingdom, where hearing aids are part of the National Health Service, the penetration rate, the number of people who have hearing aids in that system where they are free, is not much different than it is in the United States. So money is important, but it becomes sort of a reason that you can deny that you need one. Oftentimes the marketing you'll hear on TV, oh, those hearing aids cost $6,000. And you can pay a lot of money. You can buy a Tesla, or you can buy a Yugo. You'll still get from A to B, and you have to find what meets your needs and what's going to work for you. So hearing aids really can be anywhere from maybe $700 or $800 up to maybe $3,000 for one hearing aid. The over-the-counter hearing aids are going to be less expensive, maybe somewhere between, at the low kind of crappy end, maybe $150 or maybe a little bit less than that, up to as much as $3,000. So merely because they're over-the-counter doesn't mean that they're necessarily cheap. What you're missing, and the whole point of the over-the-counter hearing aids, is that a professional service is not required. So you have to keep in mind, if you get an over-the-counter hearing aid, you probably will need to download an app to your phone, and you'll adjust the hearing aid based on that app, and that will fit hopefully, your hearing loss to some extent. And then there may be a video or something that might show you how to put it on your ear and how to fit it. Whereas if you get it from a hearing care specialist like Claudia or I, then it's going to come with the services and especially the hearing testing to know just what kind of hearing aid is going to be right for you. So they're not bad necessarily, but you just have to sort of know what you're getting and why you're getting it.
I think you just did it.
Most insurances don't cover hearing aids, but lately with
Some
the,
do.
some do. University of Michigan does, and State of Michigan does, and a lot of the auto companies do. But with the advent of the Medicare Advantage plans, which a lot of people have and should probably think about it, many of the Medicare Advantage plans do have some hearing benefit. Might be as little as $250 or $500, it might be as much as $1,500. So it's important to kind of look at your plan, and I know this is the time that you can change or choose a Medicare Advantage plan, so that's one of the things that you should look for. It can't be the only thing, but look and see if the plan you're thinking about has any hearing aid coverage, so that's something that could help. Now, are there any questions?
Where did the mic go? Who's got the mic?
Yes,
I got a couple.
all right,
So, that assistive listening device.
yes.
Can the loss be up around 90 decibels and that still works?
It can be, so the question was, if you have a really severe hearing loss, she said 90 dB or any really severe to profound hearing loss, sometimes this is the only thing that will work. This can be even louder than many hearing aids. So yes, absolutely. Now, I didn't really go into it, but there's two parts to hearing. One is the volume. Certainly, less volume means you don't hear as well, but the second part of hearing is clarity. And that can vary from person to person with the same kind of hearing loss as far as volume goes, but one person might be able to understand 80 or 90% of words when we present a hearing test with words. Another person might only understand 30%. They both need hearing aids, but the one that can understand 80% is likely going to be happier than the person who understands 30%. But they both need hearing aids. But that's another reason to go to a professional that can kind of give you an idea of just what you can expect and how you can make the most out of your hearing. There are other assistive devices that work with hearing aids, like a remote microphone, that you could hand someone who would broadcast their voice right to your ears. There are television streamers where the TV sound can be streamed right to the hearing aids. So hearing aids are kind of the base, but there's other things that can be done. If someone has that severe loss or understanding is really poor, then there's other things that can be done, and that's what you need to do to talk to the person.
And this has a volume control and a tone control.
So
So
she's
we can emphasize low frequency,
Right.
high frequency, but it doesn't have the same technology that handles background noise. The
Right.
more sophisticated instruments will handle and help control and suppress background noise. I was supposed to hand out the mic. I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
This is, you have the mic.
I think
I
that's
can
what-
repeat that.
Yeah,
Karen
there we
was
go.
talking about is that,
Just so that, we've got 15 viewing right now, so.
hello, sorry.
Maybe.
So this assisted listening
Turn
device
it on.
details.
The assisted listening device differs from the hearing aids and the sophistication of technology, where I think you were referencing a 90 dB loss and the severity and profoundness of the loss. This is more simple. It does have volume or gain, like Mr. O'Connor said, and it has even a tone control. So it's very helpful in a quiet situation where one-on-one someone, for example, is in the hospital, and you know they have a very severe hearing loss and you want to pray with them. You want to talk to them without the rest of the room hearing down the hallway. This is a wonderful thing to have a conversation close. It's not for a complex situation, am I correct? In meetings and talking and moving around and even going to the store and talking in the car and having those type of things. But it's nice for a one-on-one conversation over the table, a cup of coffee, or if someone isn't feeling well and doesn't have their hearing aids on. What if someone's in a situation where they don't have their instruments and you need to speak to them or they're in a crisis? That's when these assisted listening devices are very helpful.
Yes.
If, like I visited a number don't, sometimes you forget. If I brought one of those along, would I be able to have them use it, put it on them, if they had hearing aids on, or would they have to take their hearing aid out?
Good question. When you cover, those of you who have hearing aids know, if you really cover your ears, especially if it's a severe loss or an older hearing aids, if you cover the ears, then you might get feedback and squealing, which could be a problem. So in that case, you would take the hearing aids out, you know. Probably, if the hearing aids are present and working well, you probably don't need that. If you need that because it's clearly they don't understand what you're saying, I would have them take out the hearing aid, which unfortunately might not be working. You know, if their memory is an issue and a lot of possibilities. So typically that's for people who do not have hearing aids that are working.
Okay. Do you know, is there any concern about if I were to bring something like that and do I need to get permission to use that for a resident?
You shouldn't, you know, there is a volume control and you wouldn't turn it all the way up, maybe halfway up, and there is no likelihood that it would damage their hearing, so.
And they might help you make that adjustment then?
Yeah, it'd be awfully great to have, to be able to communicate.
Again, the side is a tone control, so it's more treble or bass, as we say. And I like the feel of the click.
Claudia, thank you.
Sorry, I'm talking.
And, well, that's okay. Oh, I should, yeah.
Sorry, and if we remember the old radios we used to have as kids that would click and you turn the volume up and down and change the station, that has that same feeling. So as we're talking to people at Glacier Hills, hand it to them and say, turn that on like it's a radio. And as they're hearing themselves and you're talking to them, it's just like adjusting a radio. And on the side, it's like got an equalizer. So one can adjust it themselves for their preference. Anybody else? Who's got a question?
Another question. What if, well, see, I have some hearing issues, so can I wear one of those while the other person is wearing one, or does that cost me back?
Well, that wouldn't be any problem, but it'd be better to bring your hearing aids.
Yeah. And also, just a question about masks. I remember having a lot of trouble being able to wear a mask, and then of course they couldn't hear. I suppose one of those, it would be very helpful. It might allow me to continue to wear a mask.
That's true. Now, there are masks that have a clear visor. Don't listen to that.
Okay. Yeah.
Like that. So then they can see your mouth,
Yeah.
and especially if you're close enough, it can make a big difference. It still reduces the sound. You can tell I'm a little bit muffled even though I'm wearing a microphone. So the same things that we were talking about masks, and actually this probably reduces things even a little bit more than some of those factors, but you're getting the benefit of the vision, so that probably is a wash. Some people do so well with speech reading, especially with a severe loss, that is really all they need. And if you put a mask up there, then they're just completely lost. So that can make a big difference. So
Yeah.
wearing one like this is a great idea.
Where do you get those?
I have the resource there. It's online. There's a specific website I can give you. There's a website, a specific website for the clear mask. And I can get that information to you.
Karen.
So, with those over-the-counter things, do they let people know that they need to have their ears checked for wax buildup?
Well, that's a good question and one that's not completely clear. The FDA, when they published the rule for this, there are labeling that's supposed to go on the package. And if all the labeling that is supposed to be there, it would either be in like 0.3 type, like you get with your medications, you know, you get that where you couldn't read it if you had to, or else it's going to be a sheet like this. So yes, they're supposed to say that on there, but I don't think that people do that. There are 7 issues that you're supposed to not have. I should know those, but it's like if you had a sudden hearing loss, if you have pain in your ears, if you have drainage from your ears, if you're dizzy, if you have ringing, there's another couple,
Sorry.
the 7 red flags.
No, I don't remember.
You don't have one in your head?
Sorry.
So there are a few, but they're supposed to be listed on what things would make you not get one of those things. But it's all in the whole idea is that it would be mild to moderate hearing loss, self-perceived. So I certainly have seen many people over the years that come in with, I'm wondering how they possibly get through the day with this kind of hearing loss. And they say, oh, I don't really have any problems. Of course, everybody in their world knows that they can't hear anything. But from their point of view, it's just a little problem. So they could get that thing, and they would get it, and then they would tell the person that said you should get a hearing aid, say, well, see, I told you this didn't work. Well, it probably wouldn't work for them, but that, rather than saying that they got the wrong device, in their head they're saying, well, I don't need hearing aids, they don't work anyway. So that's why you go to a professional. So I can tell you, you need
But some people, I know one of these things, but some people, don't they just tell you,
Tom, do people ever ask you that? Say they don't have trouble hearing people, just, I can't hear the TV or the phone?
That's true. So there, if it's just, this is, something you can get that just connects to the TV, is their wireless headphones, and they work pretty well. If you truly have just a problem with the TV, you really honestly don't have a problem, and there are many people where when one half the couple has like supersonic hearing, they could hear a mouse at 40 yards, and the other person has what we would consider a mild hearing loss, they would not be really compatible in the TV room. But something like this, you can connect it to the TV. The person wearing the headphones hears things at whatever volume they want, and the TV can remain at a level that the other person can tolerate. So there are things to do that you don't necessarily have to get hearing aids, but that's kind of the reason to get your hearing evaluated, so then you can talk about that. Well, what really do we need? What's the most logical thing to do? And there are telephones, although nowadays in the world of cell phones are usually pretty easy to hear. But if you do have a landline, there's landline phones that have a volume control. So there are things that you can do. The worst thing you can do is just ignore the fact that you've got a hearing loss. That makes your life poor. As we said, there's factors that, as far as cognitive and memory, things that can affect you. It can also often make the rest of your family crazy, or crazier. So there are reasons to get evaluated, and at least find out where you are in the greater scheme of things.
Isn't withdrawal socially and depression also connected with hearing loss?
Oh, sure, yeah.
To the people that minister?
Yeah,
does
that
anybody
is,
want to try a pocket talker? Anybody interested?
and that is one of the reasons that people talk about depression and even cognitive decline. You begin to withdraw from what's going on because you didn't hear well, you don't want to make a fool out of yourself by answering incorrectly, so you begin to sit back. I saw a patient before I left U of M who was a physician, very high-level physician when he was a surgeon, but I saw him when he was about 85, and everybody around him, including all his care providers, said, well, he has dementia, he's sliding, and it's just the way it is. His wife did not buy that. I don't know if she saw it in his eyes, but he came in, we did an evaluation, he had a moderate to severe hearing loss, fitted with hearing loss, and suddenly he's back in the pink, so to speak. He was engaging, he was discussing, he was bright and cheerful again. It was like another person. I had another patient who was a very severe hearing loss that turns out all his grandchildren thought he did not like them, and he was just grumpy and wouldn't even listen to them, and they didn't really want to be around him. He got hearing aids that worked, and suddenly he was engaging, and they liked Grandpa now because they could talk to him. They went to Disney World and had a great time because they could actually communicate. So it's mainly about you, but it's also about the people around you. And in a ministry, it's not just about you, it's about the people you're trying to talk to. And it's critical to get that message across in a way that is not threatening, but it's accepting, and you're really addressing what their needs are.
I think my sense, Tom, too, that I've met people that say, I have hearing aids, but I don't wear them. Where they were tested, possibly, but they're not using it, and they're getting by one way or another, not realizing what they could have if they were following through on that.
Yeah, that's very true, and hopefully I don't see many of my patients out there. Of course, you don't know what you don't know, but I don't think a lot of them don't wear their hearing aids, some of them. But a lot of that has to do with when you are fit with hearing aids, whether it's me or another audiologist, it's important to take the time. Hopefully you have a care provider that's really trying to understand what your issues are and giving you the realization of what difference it can make to have a hearing aid. And of course, if they're not fit right, if they're just over the counter and they sound really bad, they're distorted, or they squeal, or they hurt, all reasons that people refuse to wear them. So, you know, when people come in to see me, oftentimes, if they haven't really bought into it, they'll be talking to them, and we'll do our evaluation and a needs assessment. Do you need hearing aids or not? And they'll go through this needs assessment and take out, no problem, no problem, no problem. Of course, the family that's sitting behind them are flabbergasted because they know they have all those problems. But honestly, I'll tell them that, no, I guess you don't need hearing aids, because they have to buy into it. And oftentimes, 2 weeks later, they come back after we've talked and they say, well, I guess really you were right, I do have those problems. But then they bought into it. They've made the decision themselves that they need to do something about it. So it can be a process. It's important to let someone make the decision themselves, but it's worth the effort for most people.
The point about over-the-counter versus audiologists too. I know in my case, the one that wasn't doing what we wanted to do, and we switched that brand and went to a different brand.
Right.
Now, when I get something over the counter, I gotta walk back to CVS and say, are you gonna take this back? Or
Well, they should, yeah, they're supposed to return it. And one of the many things that are on the package that they're supposed to write on there is what's the return policy, what's the warranty, where do you get help. That's all supposed to be on the package. But we went just to see, Claudia and I went to Best Buy the other day to see what they had. One, they didn't have anything there that we could get. So we had one really low-end hearing aid. And secondly, the little blurbs that they had that you could look at had no information. Nothing like, so you wouldn't even known that unless you got, you know, wrangled one of the blue shirt people and grabbed them and said, go get this one, and then you'd have to read it and say, oh, I guess I don't want that, grab and go get another one. So are people going to do that? Probably not. So the information's there. They're supposed to be able to return them, but that's not a regulation that they have to be returnable. That would be dependent on the place that you get it from and the one that you bought.
The recent change that I've found very helpful too is rechargeable and not dealing with the batteries.
Oh, yeah.
It seemed like you always had an extra battery, you had to be carrying to be careful. And I know my mother had problems, the batteries are so small, to get them in right and play that game, and now it's take them off and stick them in the box.
Right.
And they're ready to go the next day. So.
Almost all of them are on the ones that we fit. It's not price dependent. The least expensive ones can be rechargeable as well as the most expensive. So, you know, we made a decision early on that we weren't going to penalize people either for cosmetics or the features that they need. The difference between, for an audiology fit hearing aid from the low end to the high end, usually has to do with how well they work in different listening situations. So the busier you are, so say you're a nurse on the floor with pediatrics, you probably need to spend the money to get a really good hearing aid that will address all those different situations. If you're a senior that goes out once or twice a week with a small group of people, probably that really expensive one is overkill. And that's why you would talk to the audiologist, this is what I need to do, so what's going to be the best one? And then, you know, what style is right for you and that kind of thing. So those are all questions that can be answered if you go to a professional. It sounds like I'm just marketing here, but if you go to a professional that knows what they're doing, you'll get the right answer and get something that fits what your needs are. And I bet we're over time, but aren't
Could you try and pull up the starkey thing? You were gonna show that.
we? Well, if we had
But
only
it just-
Lost us a sound like.
Yeah, it'd be great, it really, it would be good to have a darky thing. I'll see if I can get Brent to help us with that in a moment. But I was, I had a couple comments. So one is that I remember that my father-in-law, this was maybe two decades ago, when he was living, and it was quite elderly. He had very tiny hearing aids that worked really well, but they didn't work for him because he kept losing them. And I've had that situation when I've been visiting some people over at the skilled living facilities also. And I suppose in that case, maybe the amplifier with the headphones would be better because they'd be less likely to lose them.
right.
Yeah.
Ask how much
Yeah.
that is.
Huh?
Ask her how much that is.
Amplifier, she's got it back there. She's got how much it is.
This one's 107.
107 or 70?
This one's 170, and the one that Tom had was 225, something like that. They're very reasonable and very helpful.
And one more concern. So I have some hearing loss at the very high range and the very low range. And during the pandemic, when we had to wear masks, and I'm still wearing masks, I couldn't really wear my hearing aids because they hang over my ear. And when I put the mask on and take it off, I was in danger of losing it, and so I kind of just stopped wearing them. But I'm wondering, are there hearing aids that you can get that don't hang over the ear so
Sure.
that there wouldn't be a problem?
Yeah, absolutely. There are hearing aids like that, but there are ways to have masks and I have one in my pocket.
Do you want your pocket?
So what I've done, this is just a regular face mask, but pull an older one, pull the ear loop off one of them, and then tie that between the two ear loops, and then it goes down there.
It's fine.
Then that's back
For
in.
feeling the net. Oh, okay.
So then there's nothing over your ears,
Oh,
and you're much less likely to lose it. You still have to be careful, but you're much less likely to lose it if you do
yeah,
that.
I'll try that. Thank you.
Get somebody else to fix it here.
Tom, did you show that mask again, the one that
Really
was,
hard.
how you fix it?
Yep, so I just pulled the ear loop off an old one, so you got this loop, and just tie it right between the two ear loops,
Okay.
and then just cut off the ends. So you have to experiment, depends on how big your coconut head is. But for mine, it's pretty big, so I need a big one. But some people don't need that much, so you just have to experiment to get the right length. But then usually these are disposable, and when you throw it away, it's like chain smoke. You take off the old one, and you've got it for the next one. So it really is, it's an inexpensive way to get something that's not, where you're not going to lose the hearing aid quite as quickly. With glasses, most of us are wearing glasses, and hearing aids, there's already a lot behind your ear, so that just takes one less thing off of there. And then I don't know the network key.
Oh.
So it was gonna say that we can't hear very well if you've got a moderate hearing loss. Sorry. But in the absence of that, are there any other questions? We do at the back, and Liz will be here for those of you online, some pamphlets. One of them is Communications a Two-Way Street. One of the pages in here is called Clear Speech. Clear speech is just sort of a technique, and the technique is to speak relatively measured, so not slowly really, but measured more or less like I'm speaking now, so that you articulate the consonants, and just a little bit more measured tone. Not monotone, but not too much inflection. And some other keys to communication, so we've got some of those back there. The slide that was on there, the 8 tips for communicating with a mask, so that's a good thing to pick up. And then a kind of a self thing about communicating with someone with a hearing loss, and then for someone who's got a hearing loss. So it kind of talks about that slide, that what to do if you're talking to somebody who has a hearing loss, or you think they do, and if you have a hearing loss, what's a good way to cope with that. So those are both out there at the front as well. So thanks.
Thank you.
Isn't this working?
No Wi-Fi.
Very sorry about that.
Yeah, because that would be so interesting
Yeah.
for people to
I know we have Wi-Fi access, I mean, I keep trying to get it online, but I don't think that would help.
There's a key password.
You want to hear a joke?
I found that book and I was so excited, because it just has.
Oh, why?
I don't know.
So mine is, this lady, lost, she couldn't find her hearing aid. She looked all over, she couldn't find it. And she says, oh, I don't need a hearing aid anymore.
Yeah,
But after a couple weeks, she realized, yeah, she really does.
Yeah,
So
but
she
I
went to
read
the
that one
doctor,
and that
and
really
checked
stood
her
out
wax,
to
and
me,
he
but
says,
yeah, like armed with
we've got a
crystal soldiers.
suppository in there.
Yeah.
She said, now I know I have my hearing aid.
Beautiful one, but yeah, I thought that one was.
Especially when you can throw it up with singing.
Oh.
One
You
other
had to
thing
stand
is
out in some way.
that sometimes when you eat a
Good to
hearing
see
aid,
Oh,
you,
yeah.
Gail.
You too.
be careful where you try to go in.
Yeah.
Get insurance.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yes,
Glad to get help.
very helpful.
You know, I wish I had had that to my dad. He did have a 90 loss. All of a sudden, I know it was a blood clot or something like that, because he had one good ear, he lost. So he goes to his audiologist in Belfort, Indiana. She tries to sell him another hearing aid so that he can hear, alarms and stuff like that. And I said, no, I said, why don't you switch the ears and add the gain? And he said, I can't stand it, this is way too loud. But that would have been, we used dragon dictation, that's how we did it. But that would have been so much nicer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because I thought his dementia was further advanced than what it was.
And it was really hearing,
Yeah,
sure.
and that's because he wasn't hearing,
And the caption telephones now that are out, there's so many things that you can do that are available.
Yeah, we didn't mention either, the sound,
The loop,
the loop,
yep.
which we don't have in our congregation.
Really? I was wondering about that.
Right now, they're talking about changes in the sanctuary and stuff
Yeah.
like that, to have the loop, and then it's direct to your
But if
hearing.
they have Bluetooth, then our modern hearing aids.
Yeah, that's true too. You could do, yeah.
They're thinking about that.
So that the signal would go to your phone, go to your, so if you can pick it up Bluetooth, and it would go to your phone, then go to your hearing aid.
Well, it goes directly to your hearing aid, actually.
Go directly to the hearing aid
Yeah.
Bluetooth, as opposed to the magnet as a T-coil?
Well, in the loop, they put a loop in, and then it's part of our sound system, it's just an option.
But you have to have a T-coil.
Yeah, then you need a T-coil, then, the
Yeah,
T-coil is what
right.
goes
And
on
the
the phone.
In the hearing aid,
Yeah, but when you.
you'd have to have the hearing,
Yeah,
but like you say, you've got then so many hearing aids, you have Bluetooth now that went directly.
yeah.
Huh, I haven't heard about that.
He also, you didn't emphasize the 3 to 5 year life of
Is-
hearing.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
When I got mine,
Tom can talk about this for
on the computer, I thought it was the rest of my life. I took really good care of it. It'd be Shelby is older than I am.
Oh,
brother.
Yeah, we had it on.
So what do you mean? I only got it in 1972, and he says, yeah, but, they're only lasting 3 to 5 years.
Oh, my God.
This was mainstream. And he said they had 14 people other side of it.
Yeah, they're 15 at one point in time.
Yeah.